Hi everyone, welcome to episode 3 of The Liberal Conservative. Today's episode is the future of borders. And so recently I've been doing some research around the Department of Education and what education is going to look like in the world and in the United States in the future. So I grew up in an immigrant household, and my parents didn't speak English. So English was a second language to me. I learned English in kindergarten, actually. And I went to school here. I went to Olive Grammar School and high school, and then college and grad school here in the United States. I took a break between high school and college. I don't know why I did that, but I did. So I went back to college in my really early 30s. I was 31, actually. And so going to college and getting an education and then going to grad school really changed my life. It changed opportunities. It opened doors for me that were not opened before. Oftentimes now in my career, when I start a new contract or when I start a new job, oftentimes I am the most educated, like degree-wise. I have the most degrees of my, out of my colleagues. So I have an intense relationship with education. I also have an enormous respect for education. I really think it opened my eyes. I've always been, a pretty good student, but I think because of the need what I needed in my 30s, which was a college degree in order to be able to have access to really good employment, it made me really focus throughout, most of my college life. And I really paid attention and really learned and really just developed an admiration like I had not before for education. And so given the current atmosphere that we are living in and the erosion of our, education system and our Department of Education and our funding and arts, and then of course the incoming job losses that are going to be attributed to artificial intelligence and everything that AI is going to eat up. I initially, of course, like many people, probably had a lot of fear around that. And then the fear just turned into me becoming a student again and being very inquisitive about what that was going to look like. Because, fear is just a lack of knowledge, right? So when you develop or acquire the knowledge of that fear, it really just kind of kills the fear, right? So I started doing a lot of research around it. I also have a daughter who is currently in college. And so I helped her decide what field she should go into, because we are headed towards, unprecedented times. That doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but it does mean that you need to be properly prepared for a future that is going to look different than our past. So in doing that research, I, in addition to having an enormous adoration and respect for education, I also very much love the law and have always been a law-driven, justice-driven human being. For many years, I wanted to go to law school, and then of course time got the best of me. I'm not saying that I'm putting that actually to the side, because I haven't given up on the possibility of that becoming a reality, but I have not done so yet. But I often do research about what that field and just what education and what human beings will look like in the future regarding their jobs. And in that, I found the most interesting information, and I thought this is great information to share with my audience here at the podcast. So let's begin with just the pure basics, and that is that this is not necessarily an era of politics, but it's definitely an era of triage. Coastlines that once held our laughter water are being swallowed by climate change. Cities that fed nations are running out of water. Farmers who kept us alive are watching the sky turn against them. And while the earth shakes and burns and floods, the governments of the world plan not for care, not for compassion, but for containment, for walls, for surveillance, for who gets to stay and who gets pushed out. Let's be honest. The leadership model that we've trusted for centuries, the patriarchal model of conquest, extraction, and war, has definitely failed us. It's not just policy failure, it's biological mismatch. Wolves learned that cooperation meant survival. They evolved into dogs, companions who thrived through love. Women have always known this truth, by the way. Men running the show do not. So here we are. We're either at the end of the patriarchy or at the end of humanity, but not both will survive. So let me give you the evidence. Let's start with the facts. By 2050, the World Bank projects that up to 260 million climate migrants across 6 regions of the world. That literally means entire nations, like the Tuvalu and the Maldives, are already negotiating with other countries to relocate their people. Bangladesh is fortifying embankments as salt water destroys farmland. And Central America's dry corridor is producing wave after wave of crop failure. And with it, migration north. Africa's Sahel region, where drought meets conflict, is already one of the largest displacement zones on Earth. Borders are blurring, and I'm not talking about just with climate change. I'm also talking about with currency, not just on a map, but in our lives. When your food, your water, your data, and your wealth move across borders, the old lines stop making sense. The law, the economy, the military, they all scrambled to redraw rules that no longer hold. And governments know this. Don't be fooled. They are classified adaptation plans, migration response scenarios, and resource mapping strategies already drafted. But they're written with one goal: protect power, not people. So I have some questions that I'm going to throw out there. When governments plan for climate-driven migration, what are they actually planning for? Human security or border security? Can anyone paint us a picture of what managed retreat looks like on the ground? Is there any country right now that's doing this with humanity in mind? Let's talk about the patriarchy as governance, not as a gender, but as a system. Patriarchy is a design built on domination, on short-term victories, on extraction, on burning the future for today's profits. I can say so much about this, right? I always find that the best way to look at geopolitics and anything global is to first think about it as if the geopolitical system is just your nuclear family, and then go from there. I think that I have a perfect case study of what each segment or what each segment can look like, right? So I am one of 4 children, right? I am also the most successful of my siblings. I had a stable mother and father figure for the formative years of my life, and my other 3 siblings did not. They had two of the 3 had a mother and father and still do. One of them had my mother and a stepfather, right? But that relationship was not as the relationship between my mother and my stepfather was not as sturdy, secure, and loving as the one between my mother and my father during my formative years. And that has shaped each of our lives. And so my siblings have grown up to be men that represent what that destructive home life, did to them. So in this case, you can argue that for the most part, when you live in a home where the man is in charge and he's not a steady figure who basically rules on domination and not love, that was the very big difference between my dad and my stepfather. My dad came from love. My stepfather came from domination, right? So so I am rooted and grounded as an adult where my siblings are not, right? So when you have an entire system, an entire geopolitical system being ruled on domination and not love, then this is why every single part of the system is breaking, is crumbling. It's why war machines get more funding than climate adaptation. It's why billionaires bunker in New Zealand while entire villages in Bangladesh drown. It's why politicians tell us to have more children for the economy while the planet can barely sustain the ones we already have. And here's the thing, this isn't a left or right problem. This is systemic. Patriarchy doesn't wear one party color. It wears power colors, and it's collapsing under its own weight. Today I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and we were speaking about Gaza and Israel, right? I don't see a future where Israel survives what it's done to Palestine. I don't see a future where Israel survives at all, because the world is aware, the people of the world are aware what Israel's government has done to Palestine. No matter how they try to change the narrative, people are aware. We see what they're doing, correct? So I don't see a world where Israel continues to thrive and survive without consequence. It just doesn't seem like that is a sustainable future for them. And so my friend, who is a staunch Democrat, immediately wanted to blame one party over the other. And I think that the most important part of politics right now in the United States is to understand one very fundamental truth. And that is that the Republicans are just basically the morality police of Afghanistan, right? They are the people that are preaching Jesus because that's just what they're hiding behind that, right? And most of them are, also they're preaching Jesus and anti-LGBTQIA plus and all of these things, but most of them are closeted. Then you find a lot of child pornography on them. They're also pedophiles. They're the party that's trying to hide the Epstein files. So they're just covering up their own, but they're continuing their stance on low because Jesus, because God, because Jesus. However, as much as I too dislike that party and the people in that party, it would be foolish of me to only blame the Republicans, because the Democrats had a whole 4 years of Biden, and Biden's administration did very little to prevent the war in Gaza, did very little to release the Epstein files, did very little to hold Trump accountable for all of his crimes. And the reason they do that is because they too benefit from the same funding machine that the Republicans do. And so they know that if they throw the Republicans under the bus, that they are going to be outed as well for their corruption. And because they pretend to be the party of the people, then they sit in silence and say nothing and pretend that they care about the majority of our freedoms and our civil liberties. But really, they are not doing anything either, right? And in order for that to change, not only do we have to get rid of our current leadership completely, we have to show up to the polls like no one's ever showed up to the polls before, because cheating is a thing. We would be so foolish to believe that these elections that we've had for the last couple of decades have all been fair and square, and that there is no cheating in our election, Of course there is, right? We would really have to be very silly to believe and trust that corrupt politicians are not being corrupt at the ballot box, right? That would be so naive for us to continue to believe that theory. It's not the truth. So I don't know where or how we can frame the new real narrative now that we are caught in this cycle of basically billionaires owning all of our means of communication and this mass surveillance. I mean, the reason that there is mass surveillance is because they want to erode the possibility of outrage, right? They want to erode our communication with each other. They want to continue to divide. Divide and conquer is their only way to to power. So what does leadership look like when it's built on care instead of control? We should pose these questions to women-led organizations so that you can see the success. The problem is that women-led organizations do not get the same kind of funding. So they don't have access to the same kind of services and resources that fund male-led organizations that concentrate their abilities on accumulating wealth instead of caring for the masses. I would love if we could find many examples of where corporations saved lives in a climate crisis. And what do you think a matriarchal approach to borders would even look like? Because I don't know. That's a question I'm also posing to myself. But I can tell you this. I do believe that it would look a lot healthier and a lot happier and a lot more inclusive than it looks now. Let me tell you a story. The sea was rising and relocation seemed inevitable. Instead of waiting for the military to draw evacuation zones, women leaders organized land trust, pooled resources, and negotiated directly for resettlement space. The result? Families stayed together, cultural traditions were preserved, and survival wasn't just about living, but about living with dignity. That's what patriarchy misses. It thinks survival is about domination, but survival has always been about love, care, and cooperation. So where do we stand? We stand at the border ourselves, the line between collapse and rebirth. The patriarchal model has burned through its credibility at this point. The world feels dark because of it, but the wolves became dogs. They chose love over war, and they survived. The same choice is in front of us: to cling to borders drawn in conquest or to redraw them in compassion, to stay in patriarchy or to evolve into the matriarchy. One path ends in humanity's collapse, and the other rebuilds the world in our image, cooperative, resilient, and unstoppable. It's time to choose, and the future of borders is the future of us.